Season 1, Episode 1, Wolf Moon, opens quite nicely. First, we get a glimpse of faceless authorities looking for something in the woods. Our protagonist, Scott McCall, is working hard and getting ready for his first day back at school. But the mood instantly shifts when he hears a strange sound and goes out to investigate.
Stiles, what the hell are you doing?
It turns out to be Stiles Stilinski, Scott's best friend. The police found a dead body, but they only found half, and Stiles convinces Scott to go looking for the other half. This is a very quick scene, but we learn some very core points. The show is a clear mix of both horror and comedy, with a little bit of drama. Scott is more reserved and really wants to make the most out of his high school experience, like making the lacrosse team. Stiles, whose dad is also the sheriff, is more bold and a little bit reckless. Together, the two even each other out. The pair go into the woods searching for the other half of the body, while Scott has trouble keeping up with Stiles because of his asthma. Scott actually has asthma because Jeff Davis, the showrunner, had asthma as a kid. They run into Sheriff Stilinski, Stiles' dad, and Stiles covers for Scott before being sent home. Scott, now without his own ride home, has to navigate back out of the woods in the middle of the night. An unnatural shift in the atmosphere stops him before he's nearly overrun by a pack of frantic deer, clearly running away from something. Scott loses his inhaler, tries his best to find it in the dark, and instead finds the other half of the body that him and Stiles were looking for at the beginning of the night. Understandably freaked out, Scott panics and falls back down a steep hill. It's too late after he recovers that he realizes there's something in the woods with him, and it attacks him. Scott escapes, finally getting out of the woods, and nearly running into a car in the pouring rain, but it swerves at the last minute. After coming to terms with what he's just been through, Scott reveals the evidence of his assault, a bite. The next day, Scott shows Stiles his injury, thinking that it was a wolf who bit him. Stiles says that there are no wolves in California, which is technically true, but gets distracted by the love of his life, Lydia Martin. Meanwhile, there's a new girl in town, and Scott figures it out before anybody else because he hears her cell phone ring from outside. It's what Jeff Davis calls Scott's first Peter Parker moment. That is the first indication of his supernatural abilities. The girl is Allison Argent, and Scott is instantly infatuated, though she's scooped up by the most popular kids in town, Lydia and her boyfriend Jackson.
Beautiful people hurt together.
I love how you can tell this was filmed in 2010 with the heavy black mascara, dark eyeshadow, thin eyebrows, and flat-ironed hair. The class itself is discussing Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis. It's a literary reference to change and transformation, which will quickly become a major force in Scott's life. After school, Scott and Stiles are trying out for the lacrosse team, of which Lydia's boyfriend Jackson is the captain of. On top of his enhanced hearing, Scott quickly realizes that his reflexes are also faster than ever before, stunning the team and capturing the attention of both Allison and Lydia. Scott connects the dots and believes that his new abilities came from the bite. Stiles jokes that he's probably a werewolf now.
Not a joke anymore.
While the two try to find the dead body from the other night. They run into
Derek Hale,
who kicks them off of his family's private property, but not before kindly giving Scott his inhaler back. All Scott and Stiles know about Derek is that his whole family died in a fire some 6 years ago, and now he's back in town under mysterious circumstances. Scott goes to work at the veterinarian's office. Like, when is he gonna do his homework? He gets yelled at by cats for some mysterious reason before Allison Argent comes banging on his door. She's totally freaking because she hit someone's dog in the pouring rain. The two share a really sweet moment as Scott fixes the dog's leg, gives Allison his shirt to change into, and generally calms her down. He is head over heels for her. This scene during the auditions for Teen Wolf was actually the chemistry read between Scott and Allison. Before she leaves, Scott asks Allison out to a party that Friday night. Satisfied with his night, Scott goes to bed before he finds himself waking up in the woods. I love this effect because it was completely theatrical. They just put leaves on the bed. Anyway, Scott sees the creature again in the woods, freaks out, and manages to run away. At the second day of lacrosse tryouts, Jackson confronts Scott and accuses him of using steroids to try and make the team. Scott has a moment of indirectly confessing how stressed he's actually been because of these newfound abilities, but Jackson decides that Scott is hiding something, and he's going to find out what. Stiles finds Scott and tries to tell him that the sheriff's department did find evidence of a wolf in the woods the night of the bite. Jackson makes sure to antagonize Scott, unknowingly triggering his supernatural abilities. Through this rage, Scott single-handedly scores a stunning goal and makes the team.
Yeah, well, you made the shot. And guess what? You're starting, buddy.
Stiles is totally freaked out, goes through a Twilight-like montage of research, and realizes that Scott is actually a werewolf.
Remember the joke from the other day?
There could be something seriously wrong with me.
I know, you're a werewolf. Okay, obviously I'm kidding.
Not a joke anymore.
Scott doesn't take this well, because he feels like Stiles is trying to ruin his life now that things are going well for him. Stiles pushes back and tells Scott that he can't go to the party with Allison that Friday, because that's the night of the full moon. Scott's anger is triggered again, and this time he almost hurts Stiles. This scene during Teen Wolf auditions was actually the audition for Stiles. Up until this point, Stiles is mostly a comedic character, but the showrunners needed an actor who could be both funny and dramatic. Taken aback by his own rage, Scott tries to go ahead with the night and take Allison out. This is the first appearance of Melissa McCall, Scott's mom, but there's not much else to say about her yet. Scott and Allison go to the party, where Scott finds Derek creeping on him. Derek's like that guy who graduated high school, but he never left town, and so now he's just hanging around high schoolers, and he doesn't have any friends his own age. Anyway, Derek leaves, Scott and Allison dance, they get intimate, and Scott's bloodlust is triggered.
Bloodlust. Yeah, your urge to kill. I'm already starting to feel an urge to kill, Stiles.
He leaves the party once he figures out what's going on and accidentally strands Allison. But not to fear, because Derek offers to drive this young teenage girl home. You know what's funny? Tyler Hoechlin, who plays Derek Hale, is older than Tyler Posey, who plays Scott McCall. But Crystal Reed, who plays Allison Argent, is older than both of them. I think she was even the oldest cast member playing a teen on the show. And now I'm curious about what a Derek-aged Allison would have looked like in this episode. At home, Scott's in excruciating pain and has no idea what's happening, but a close-up shot of the full moon might give us a hint. Scott begins to transform despite Stiles trying to intervene and help him, but Scott makes a connection and tells Stiles to go after Allison because he thinks Derek is the wolf that bit him.
Scott, Derek's the one who drove Allison from the party.
Scott, now in full werewolf form, goes looking for Allison, which takes him to the same woods we saw in the beginning of the episode. Scott tries to confront Derek, but Derek beats him to it and claims that he was only trying to protect Allison from Scott and his new dangerous abilities. Before things get too heated, the pair are attacked by werewolf hunters, led by a mysterious new character. But Derek manages to get him and Scott out of there before the hunters get too close. Scott blames Derek for turning him into a werewolf, but Derek says that he should be proud of his new abilities rather than ashamed of them.
The bite is a gift. I don't want it.
He also says that Scott has no chance of controlling them without Derek's help.
So you and me, Scott? We're brothers now.
And then he leaves him in the forest. Anyway, Stiles picks up Scott the next day, and he surprisingly shares Derek's sentiments. He thinks it's really cool that Scott's a werewolf, despite telling Scott that his life was basically over like 20 minutes ago.
You're cursed, Scott.
But more importantly, Stiles affirms that he'll be by Scott's side and help him get through this. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for Allison, since Scott has to keep this new part of his life a secret from her. But she gives him a second chance after being abandoned at the party, and things are looking up. That is, until Allison's dad arrives to pick her up. And Mr. Argent looks unsettlingly familiar. Pilot episodes are really hard. They're responsible for introducing characters that we can either relate to or want to care about, setting both the tone and genre of the show, setting the show apart from every other show in its category, asking enough questions to tease at the season's arc but not so much that the audience is confused and overwhelmed, and finally proving that our main character deserves to tell this story. And then they have to do it for 11 more episodes. There's not a lot I can talk about now that isn't significant until later episodes, but there is one major theme introduced in this episode that paints an important picture of the series overall. Teen Wolf is about lore, whether it is retelling that lore or remixing it. It's a show that likes to lean heavily into archetypes and then push them further. Allison is the girl next door, Stiles is the funny sidekick, Lydia is the superficial queen bee, Jackson is the racist jock, Derek is the handsome man with the dark past, and Scott is our unassuming hero. If Teen Wolf was anything but Teen Wolf, these characters would stay within the bounds of these stereotypes. Instead, the show likes to make us question why these characters are the way they are and give some real motivations to move the plot forward. And you could say the same thing about the story itself. A boy being bitten by a werewolf and having to adjust to his newfound powers while maintaining a double life has definitely been done before, I agree. I do think at the time we weren't used to seeing that kind of story in this medium. Teen Wolf came out in 2011. Usually supernatural television deals with human characters that through some traumatic event are thrown into the supernatural world and often have to fight the monsters and demons within them. By those bounds, Stiles or Allison or even Lydia would be better suited to be our point of view. The werewolf hunters would be our series protagonists. But by making making Scott, our main character, a newly turned werewolf, Teen Wolf asks an interesting question. What happens when you become the monster? And does that turn you into a monstrous person? Someone who is capable of hurting the people that they love.
The bite is a gift. I don't want it. You will.
I won't sit here and deny the messier parts of this episode, whether it's the acting, the lines, the visual effects, the fact that a ton of shots are filmed on a home camera in a garage, but I genuinely think that's part of the charm of season 1. The first 2 episodes of the show have a particular campiness to it, like they tried to have more fun because the show wasn't yet incredibly popular and nobody knew if it would be. And I admit I do love seeing the actors in their infancy now and compare their choices to when they become more comfortable with their characters later. So the lines are a little bit punchier, the comedy is messier, and the show doesn't quite feel polished. But without that energy, we would have never been gifted the single best line in the entire series.
Where are you getting your juice?
My mom does all the grocery shopping.